Today, we're diving into a really fascinating essay by David Cobb Bowen, and it's all about a concept he calls the old school. It's this very personal and pretty profound look at how things like family values, honor, and tradition might be more than just old-fashioned ideas. They might just be the glue holding our civilization together. And you know what? It all kicks off with one simple phrase his grandfather used to say.
You're a gentleman and a scholar. It all starts right here. You see, for the author, this was so much more than just a saying. It was the absolute highest compliment his grandfather could pay someone, and it was like the seed that grew into this entire philosophy of life, a code of conduct that got passed down through generations.
So where did this all come from? Well, to really get a handle on what the old school means, we have to go back to the source. We have to meet the man who basically was the old school, the author's grandfather.
I mean, this portrait really paints a picture, doesn't it? Raymond Curtis Bowen. Here was a man rooted in tradition and discipline. You see it right there. He was a man of institutions, church, fraternal orders, a top-tier university. He was into the finer things, from Shakespeare to a good Scotch, but what really defined him was his absolute reverence for his family. In his grandson's eyes, he was the blueprint for the old school.
And look, this wasn't just his personal code. It became a family inheritance. This set of manners, this sense of pride, this whole way of carrying yourself, it was passed down, becoming the bedrock for his kids and grandkids.
So how does a personal code like that become a core principle? Well, this is where the author introduces a key idea he calls decorum. And the way he learned its deeper meaning, well, that came from his mother. His mom, who was raised Catholic in New Orleans, taught him this definition of a sacrament. Now, this isn't just about religion here. Think of it as a framework for understanding why people do what they do, an outward sign of an inward commitment.
And this is where it all clicks. For his family, decorum, behaving like ladies and gentlemen, not cursing at home, that was their sacrament. All that polite behavior and controlled speech, it wasn't just for show. No, it was the outward sign of their inward commitment to the family's dignity.
But don't mistake this for some fragile, superficial code. This thing had real teeth. The author shares this incredible story about his mom. Her best friend gets rejected from a fancy sorority because of a racist, colorist paper bag test. And what did she do? She walked. Just like that. She chose our friend, she chose her honor, over the status of that old school institution. Now that is decorum in action.
Okay, now the author throws out this really blunt, honestly a pretty jarring question. He says it's not just to shock you. For him, the answer to this question gets to the very heart of a family's internal dignity. His logic is, if your own family doesn't respect you enough to avoid that word, how can you possibly expect respect from the wider world?
So, this brings us to the core definition. For the author, decorum is the rote learning of honor. Think of it like muscle memory for your character. It's the daily practice, the discipline that builds up your honor and, as he puts it, stops you from spiraling into self-loathing.
Now he takes on a really common criticism head-on, the idea that this kind of decorum is just acting white. But he totally pushes back on that. He says, look, that's a false choice. He argues that everyone, even the people inventing new, rebellious ways of being, is ultimately just searching for their own kind of dignity.
All right, so we get it for a family, but how does this scale up? I mean, what does this have to do with society as a whole? Well, the author argues it's not just important, it's absolutely essential.
And this right here, this is his central thesis, trust. He calls it the fundamental currency of civilization. Without it, everything falls apart, and we're basically just left with what he calls barbarian competition. Everything we build rests on it.
And that trust, it holds up everything. Think about it. Our politics, our economies, our societies, even our armies. His point is, these things don't just run on paper and rules. They run on the trust we have in each other. The honor taught by the old school is what creates people you can actually trust to run a government, to honor a contract, or to lead an army. Without that, the whole system grinds to a halt.
And he's really clear on this point. This code isn't about race, it's universal. And to back it up, he talks about his own father, who, way back in the 1950s, pledged an integrated fraternity. I mean, that's a perfect example of an old-school act of building trust and honor across racial lines when it was anything but easy.
Okay, so if trust is the currency, how do you keep it in circulation? How do you make sure these values last from one generation to the next? This brings us to what he calls his most direct and maybe most controversial claims.
He puts it right out there. The family. He says the family is the fundamental, indispensable unit for passing this stuff on.
It's not the government's job, not the school's job. It's the family's job, first and foremost, to carry this code forward through time.
And this character, this dignity, it's not easy. He lays out some ground rules. First, you have to fight for it, every single generation. It's not just handed to you. It takes real, internalized self-discipline. And he's got no time for shortcuts, whether that's some transhumanist fantasy or trying to program ethics into an AI. True character, he says, has to be lived.
But wait a minute, what about new ideas? What about pushing back and challenging the old ways? The author totally gets this. He digs into this crucial tension between that stabilizing tradition and the kind of creative rebellion a society absolutely needs to grow.
And this chart really lays out that dynamic perfectly. On one side, you've got the old school. It's slow, it's careful, its whole job is to test things over generations and preserve what works, to give you something solid to stand on. And on the other side, you've got the creative edge, the punk, the artist, the rebel. Their job is to experiment and shake things up. Because let's be honest, not every old rule is a good rule. A healthy society, he says, needs both of these forces constantly pulling at each other.
I just love this quote from his mother. It perfectly nails how even the disciplined old school makes space for rebellion. It's this brilliant, unspoken permission to be a little foolish, to break the rules. But it comes with a condition. There's a time and a place. You earn the right to eat cold cereal for dinner once you're standing on your own 2 feet.
And so that's what this whole exploration leaves us with. This massive question: how do we, as a society, strike that balance? How do we hold on to the traditions that give us stability and trust, while also making room for the rebels and innovators who push us forward? That's the challenge, right? For every single generation.